All right, I guess I'll start. Welcome to our annual Halloween podcast that's called Short Fuse for Fear. I think this is the fifth one we've done, Janine. Does that sound about right?
I think so.
5 episodes in 5 years. That's insanely productive.
I wish
Anyway,
you had
so
told me that was the title before you invited me to do this, or I never would
what?
have. No, okay.
I'm sure this will get edited out, but that title is from my friend. So the very first one we did was with my some improv friends, and my friend Jillian refused to do it, and I was like, "Why won't you do it?" Because she's like, "Well, I can't talk about scary stuff. I'm literally too scared to talk about stuff," and I'm like, "That's not possible." And then she said, "Oh yeah, I just have a short fuse for fear." We started this podcast during COVID because you couldn't do anything for Halloween, and you couldn't even get trick or treaters because nobody would trick or treat like in the middle of COVID. So I think we were just really depressed and we're like, oh, this kind of sucks. You don't get to do anything for Halloween. So I decided this year to talk about a show from the past called Kolchak the Night Stalker, which is a show that I watched as a kid in the I'm going to date myself. Actually, I don't think I watched it. I think I watched it in like 1980 and 1981. It actually was initially shown on TV in 1975, the TV show. There were two movies before it in 72 and 73. But obviously, I didn't watch it in 1975 because I would have been 5 years old.
1974 and
Yeah,
1975.
so I would have been there's no way in the world I would be a 5 year old watching that show. But
Same here.
yeah, exactly. But what did happen, as I found out, is that it only ran for a year. It was only 20 episodes. And there were the two movies before the TV show. So there were two made for TV movies, one called The Night Stalker and one called The Night Strangler. But what had happened is that it got canceled, but it eventually got moved to this thing called the CBS Late Movie, which some people as old as me might remember, which is this, they would just play these movies really late at night, I believe on Saturday nights, and it mostly ran 11:30 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. I definitely remember watching these episodes and being basically half asleep. I remember trying to stay awake to watch it. My brother Jim was the one that wanted to watch it. He'd be like, "You gotta watch the show. It's gonna be so fun. There's vampires and werewolves and everything." I was like, "Oh, so cool!" But obviously, I would have been like, I don't know, 9 or something like that. It was kind of hard to stay awake till 12:30. I definitely remember waking up at like trying to stay awake, falling asleep, and then waking up at like in the middle of the show, probably at like 1 o'clock, and just being like, "Whoa, this show's crazy,
So
man!"
it was that late.
Yeah, it was that late, and that's definitely when I watched it because, like I said, the original run was 1975. There's no way as a 5 year old that I would watch it. So yeah, it looks to me again, according to my notes, that it was way more popular when it ran as the CBS late movie,
Depending on
and
what.
I definitely remember that was kind of the charm of it is that it was on so late at night
Yeah.
that it just was like I guess freakier at 1 o'clock at night on a Saturday
For
night or
sure.
something like that, right?
I was really excited every week to watch Night Stalker. I would try so hard to stay awake. And sometimes I would fall asleep and wake up, and it would be the morning. I'd be so angry that I had missed
Right.
Night Stalker. But a lot of times I did stay awake and
How
watch
did
it.
you find out about it? Because I found out about it through my older brother. Did you just see it in the TV guide or read a
I don't
newspaper
remember. I
article?
wouldn't doubt if, yeah, we always had the TV guide in our house. I wouldn't doubt if it was that way, or maybe I wouldn't doubt if my parents even told me about it, that they thought I would like it.
Did they watch it with you? Did they stay awake with you, or is it just you?
Um, I feel like oftentimes everyone else had fallen asleep, so it would
Yeah,
just be me, which made it even spookier at the time.
yeah.
But there were some times when I know that I watched some episodes with my father. He really liked it as well.
Right. Did you now I don't even actually remember if I got scared. I remember being freaked out by it, but do you
I don't
remember
remember being
actually? Yeah.
terrified ever, but
Obviously rewatching it, it's not that scary,
hmm
right? But you know that's having done this before, where you go back and look at
Hmm.
stuff that scared you when you were young. Obviously, some things stand the test of time, like you know The Exorcist or something like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, but I can definitely put myself in the shoes of like the 11-year-old Jeff and totally understand that, you know, being awake at 1 o'clock in the morning and watching the show in the basement of my parents' house, being
Hmm.
totally freaked out. I think my brother Jim was always watching it with me because he really
Hmm.
liked he loved that show. But anyway, so here are some other fun facts about Night Stalker. Like I said, they had 20 episodes, and it got canceled. It's kind of famous for inspiring Chris Carter to create the X Files. At least it was a big influence on him. And then there's some very famous writers who worked on the show. David Chase, I did not know this. David Chase, who created The Sopranos, I think it was his first writing gig on the show. And then Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, creators of Back to the Future, they wrote one episode.
Hmm.
And so I hadn't watched these episodes since I was probably 11. And I was surprised how it was kind of a comedy, even though I don't know how well the humor stands up, but it's obviously like 50 years old. But I was kind of pleasantly surprised that it's kind of a funny mix of scary and funny. So this is a good segue because the very first episode, I was kind of shocked that Jack the Ripper is the first episode. I was shocked how much, well, at least for 1975, how much sort of sexual stuff there was. So Jack the Ripper in 1975 Chicago, his first victim is a go-go dancer, but
Oh
not
yeah.
in Chicago, in Milwaukee. I don't know why that
Oh
they made a
really?
big they made a big deal about that in Milwaukee. So he kills a go-go dancer in Milwaukee. So they have some footage of the go-go dancers, but they're all in their bikinis, right? But then he kills a. I thought at first it was a prostitute, but it was actually just a girl walking down the street with a gigantic stuffed panda. And they have after he kills her, they show the shredded giant stuffed panda, which I thought was a little strange. But then the rest of the episode takes place in a massage parlor, which again I thought like this is pretty scandalous for
Hmm.
1975. And so he gets into a fight with the modern day Jack the Ripper at the massage parlor, and it was the very first episode they made, so maybe they were like, "Oh, we gotta make it spicy, spice it up a little bit." Yeah, I don't really know what you could get away with on prime time in
Yeah.
1975, but
Hmm.
I guess a go-go dancers in bikinis are probably right on the line. They were right on the line. They were probably like so close, but they got away with it somehow. But also thought it was funny in that episode, and it kind of continued throughout the series of like Jack the Ripper. Now I know a lot about Jack the Ripper, or at least read about him, whatever. And his main superpower seems to be jumping. Like he's like always jumping off of buildings and
Yeah.
leaping into the air. And then when he at one point he like takes on 10 cops, and then they just show all the cops being like tossed hither and thither. The cops, some of the cops are like doing somersaults in the
Oh
air, like
yeah,
they're
that happens a
alien.
lot in the
Oh
series.
my, what the war? I was like, was there something going on in 1975 where instead of, because I just assumed it'd be like, you know, people getting punched out and stuff like that. But and then on another episode, the cruise ship episode with the werewolf, he takes there's a werewolf and he does the same thing. The werewolf like takes on everybody and he just starts throwing people. He throws them off the
Mhm.
boat. And at one point he even does like a WWE move. He like picks up some
Mhm.
hapless tourist over his head and like spins them and then he
Mhm.
throws them across the place.
Mhm.
But apparently Jack the Ripper did have a superpower of jumping and leaping all over the place.
I wonder if that was in his original life, if he was if he had that superpower in his original life as well, or
Maybe he was a gymnast. Jack the Ripper, the gymnast.
while he was dead all these years, he was training.
He's been training for the
His
Olympics.
corpse was training, yeah, for jumping from rooftop to rooftop and
Well, I kind of
whatnot.
like that he has. It's a funny idea that he has superhuman powers
Hmm.
because you know I just thought he was good at killing people and cutting out their guts and stuff like that.
Nope, he's
But yeah,
also a superhero.
he's also a superhero.
Hmm.
So This is where that was my very good segue into talking about the episode, Sean. So actually, my two favorite episodes were the Jack the Ripper episode, and well, I'll let you go next, Sean. Like, why don't you tell us about your favorite episodes that you watched?
Oh, my favorite
If you
episode.
can whittle it down to one or two,
Well, some of them I haven't watched for some years at this
right?
point. But
We won't judge you, Sean.
thank you. Uh, One of them I did just rewatch because I remembered watching this with my father. They have been, they are, they will be,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's
Oh
about
my God.
it's about
What's
an
crazy?
invisible entity
Right.
is menacing zoo animals,
Right.
and I get, well,
She,
actually killing them, and they're found dead with, I don't know how they determined this. All of their bone marrow has been removed.
right.
Did they
Right.
do an autopsy on a cheetah and
I
determine
don't
the
know.
cause of death? Bone
I, d-
marrow is
I,
gone. It's just gone. The bone marrow is gone.
they had to bring in a special veterinarian coroner to
Yeah, that's
do
right.
the do the
Eating a
autopsy of this
sandwich.
shit.
Yeah.
What the
So
hell
yeah,
happened to
so
this? What the
then
hell happened to this cheetah?
yeah.
What did you do to this cheetah? His bone marrow
So,
has been sucked out.
so then Kolchak races onto the scene of a crime that's happening. Police are there, squad cars all over the place. I don't know if it's like supposed to be I don't know what it's supposed to be, but one of the one of the walls explodes outward as if the Kool-Aid Man were going to emerge,
Right.
but instead it's just a several piles of what looks like silver bars.
I think they're lead
Turns out that
ingots.
they're lead ingot, and
Right.
they just kind of disappear. And Kolchak looks at the police chief and he's like, "What? Blah, blah, blah. Did we just see the same thing?" And he's like, "Yeah, whoa, God, I don't know what I saw, but blah blah blah." But also, that is a scene. Also, that's a scene where police are flying through the air
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
slow motion,
In slow
um,
motion.
as if they jumped on a trampoline and then
Right.
uh, didn't have a good landing. But
I feel like there were a lot. There were a lot of mini trampolines that were used on the set,
many trampolines. They
and a
jump on the
lot of
trampoline and then flail their arms
yeah.
and
And then when they cast for the cops, they were like, do you have a gymnast background?" They're like, "Yes, I do. You're hired.
yeah.
We need you to do a what's a good gymnast term, Janine? We need you to do a triple double twist when you get thrown by the werewolf." And
Into
yeah,
a kiddie pool.
into the kiddie pool.
But then as the story progresses, human victims are found with their bone marrow missing, and Kolchak, as he always does, encounters this monster. It's invisible. He can't see it, but leaves and whatever are blowing at him, and he's taking photographs of it with his camera, and it backs off. And he looks at his camera and he realizes that something about his camera is warding off this invisible
Oh
entity.
yeah.
But then he you can edit this part out later maybe.
No way. I'm leaving this in, Sean.
He
I want to embarrass you. You're just
Kolchak,
so.
he ends up at a planetarium,
Yep. Yep.
and this
Planetarium.
this invisible entity is attacking again, and uh, somehow he's led to a field where he sees an actual UFO sitting in the field, and he runs out into the field taking photographs of it with his cool camera, and the thing comes at him again. He takes photos of it. He realizes that his flash gun, when it
Okay.
reloads the battery, it whines. Do you remember that they
Yeah,
would
I
do
kind of
that?
remember that.
High
Yeah.
pitched whine, and it wards off this alien. The alien, you see the door of the UFO open up and close, and it takes off. And I think that might be the only time, or one of the only times, that Kolchak didn't stop or kill the monster. It just left because it
I
couldn't
def
take that camera
I definitely
flash.
remember watching that and having no idea what was going on. I had to go online and look up the description of the episode because I was like, I can't, what is going on in this episode? Couldn't follow it at all.
But the
Uh,
episode inspired my father and I to try bone marrow.
oh, really? I was thinking that as I was watching it, if they knew back then, if they would have known back then that someday it would be a delicacy that you'd eat in a restaurant.
Yeah, and it tasted
They,
great.
you had bone marrow in Quincy, Illinois, Sean?
Yeah,
Really?
we just had got some, I don't know, ribeye steaks or something. I was a kid. I don't remember what it was, and
Huh. Is that
we
a
ate the
real
bone
story?
marrow out of the
Is
out
that a
of the
real
bone.
story, Sean?
It is a real story.
Wow, that's
I know
interesting.
it's hard to believe.
You might be the. I wonder if there are other people out there that were inspired to culinary adventures because of food on Kojak.
I'd like to think so.
That's interesting. Yeah, I liked it that episode, but I could not. I was just like, I hope the rest of these episodes are not like this because I can't follow. I have no idea what's going on. Absolutely no
Oh,
idea what's
well,
going
and
on.
then when he talked into his cassette tape
Right.
recorder at the end, he he narrated that the alien must have been lost, a lost traveler
Huh.
that crashed landed on the Earth and needed to repair its ship, hence the lead ingots, and needed
Oh,
to
that's why the
find
letting goes.
food,
Got it.
have a few meals while it was working, hence the
Okay.
bone marrow.
Oh, okay. See, I think by that point, by the time I got to the end of the episode, I was like, I can't. I wasn't paying attention. You're right, though. I guess he could tie it all up. They probably had to he had to tie it all up by doing the narration into his tape recorder.
It seems like everything happens in the last 5 minutes of each episode.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then they wrap it up real fast. He narrates into his tape recorder.
That was a good one. I agree with you, Sean. My personal favorite.
They're all good
They're all yeah. Let's be fair. They're all really fantastic and good.
in varying
And
shades of good.
I found my attention drifting a few times, to be perfectly honest. But my favorite one was actually this one called I'm going to mispronounce, called the Trevi Connect Collection. Trevi.
Oh,
Uh, it was a
is that the? Go ahead. Sorry.
it
That,
starts out with Kojak talking about his friend is a fashion spy. That apparently there are spies out there, Sean, that steal designs
yep.
from major designers. So immediately I'm just like, oh, okay, I've never heard of a fashion
I
spy, but
remember
also
seeing this one specifically when I was
yeah,
a kid too.
but it takes
It's a
place in
good one.
Chicago, and I'm not entirely I was like, is Chicago a big fashion place? I've never really heard of I know New York and LA, whatever, but whatever, fine. But yeah, so he's hanging out, taking pictures of the designs, I guess, of this place called Trevi or whatever, and then he gets attacked by mannequins.
Hmm.
And so Kojak gets involved. Kojak shows up to a fashion show circa 1975, and then he's hanging out backstage talking to some of the models, I think. And then he kind of wanders off, and then so there's a lady that runs the fashion house. I think she's called Mrs. Trevi or whatever like that. There's a model who's talking to Kojak, flirting with Kojak, whatever. And there's a twist. I'll give you the twist later on. But she's kind of sitting there in front of her little makeup table waiting to go on to another fashion show. And then this other model comes flying in with her entourage, and it's like, oh my god, it's her name's Ariel. It's Ariel, the famous international model. And then Ariel's handlers come up to model, the other model, and they're like, "You've been bounced from this show. You're kicked out. You're out of the show because Ariel's here." And then the model's like, "Well, that's not really fair, but I guess who am I to say that that Ariel shouldn't take my place?" And so,
Hmm.
up until this point, they keep having close-ups on a white cat, and you're kind of thinking the cat. is going to do something. Well, what the cat does is attack Ariel, the famous international model, and rip her face to shreds so that the other model gets her place back in the fashion show. So the twist is that model is actually a witch, and she's attempting to take over the fashion world by being a witch. So she apparently puts a curse on Ariel, the famous international model, and she has this cat scratch her face. And then somehow there's a subplot with the mob, like the mob's trying to shake down this fashion business. I couldn't figure that one out, but every once in a while some tough guys show up and push Kojak around and tell him
Yeah, a
to
lot of times the stories get a little not
muddled.
completely explained either, which is fun too.
Yeah, there's a really good transition where it's like they're at the backstage of the fashion show. The white cat attacks the international model, rips her
Mhm.
face. You can see the blood dripping, and then they immediately cut to a guy in a phone booth, and these guys drive by and just machine gun the phone booth. You're just like, wait a minute, what just happened? But yeah, the mob is somehow involved. But also, Kojak then somehow shows up at a meeting of witches in Chicago. It's like
Yeah,
there's a professor talking about the occult,
that's
but
right.
the audience is just like suburban housewives,
Mhm.
and somehow Kojak gets tricked into going to a coven. Coven. I can never pronounce it because of American movie. Is it Coven or Coven? I can't remember. Coven, Coven, same thing.
Let's stick
And
with
It's
Coven.
it's Coven, but yeah, I definitely think you should say Coven in honor of
in
American movie.
American movie, they're like, no, it's
Thank you,
Coven.
Janine.
It's Coven. Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Janine.
Mhm.
Um, now you distracted me. Now I lost my train of thought. Anyway,
Get
so
back in your flow.
Get
he
back
go
to talking about Kojak.
okay. He goes to the witches coven meeting, and then they kind of trick him. I wasn't really. I lost. I couldn't follow what was going. But he somehow finds out that you can make what's called a mojo bag. So he makes this little bag, and it has like a bell in it and some claws, maybe chicken claws, raven claws, and also some copper wiring, and that becomes
Mhm.
his weapon. So he goes back to the fashion house to figure out the crime that has to do with the mob or something, and then the witch, who he thought was her friend, shows up, and she's like, "Ha ha ha! Like I tricked you. I'm the real witch, and I'm gonna take over the Chicago fashion industry." And then, of course, the mannequins attack Kojak, but he takes his little mojo bag and scares him off, and then the witch starts screaming, and then this is my favorite part. He at some point he was got advice from the professor of the occult on how to kill a witch, and he was like, well, you can tell if someone's a
Mhm.
witch if you drown them, and they, I forget, don't drown or do drown. So he
Don't
takes the
drown.
takes the model slash witch's head and dumps her in some water, but
Yeah.
then it turns out it's a giant bucket of blue dye.
Mhm.
So when he takes her head out, she's completely blue, like a Smurf.
Because she dyes her hair blue.
Her hair is blue and
Yeah.
her face is blue. And then it's like that's the
Uh-huh.
last straw. She's like completely furious with him. She chases him with a knife out of the building. And then apparently Kojak was told you can kill a witch by accusing her of being a witch in public. So she chases him out of the building, and on the street there's a bunch of people going to whatever dinner, the theater, and she's got her blue face, her blue hair, and has a knife. And then Kojak just turns around, like you said. This is like the last 2 minutes of the episode. He just
Yeah.
turns around and says, "I accuse you of being a witch," and she just screams, and episode's over.
Oh, right.
Got his
Because
tape
that's
recorder.
how
Yeah,
to destroy a witch is to accuse them in
yeah.
public.
He accused her, and then she just, I don't know, disappeared, exploded. And then
Yeah.
of course he's got his little tape recorder, and I forget what he said. Like, well, that's just the way it goes when you're a witch. I guess she won't
No,
be on the run. She
that's
won't be on the runway anymore.
that's one of the best episodes.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
one.
and yeah, I remember that one specifically when I was a kid because that one actually did kind of scare me. The mannequins.
I'd say I think the mannequins could be really creepy if you were a kid. In my notes, I wrote down when mannequins attack. That was my nickname for that episode. But yeah, I could see that being pretty creepy. It would freak me out.
Well, I think another fun thing for me about it when I was a kid was I grew up in south part of Illinois, and it took place in Chicago,
Oh yeah,
so
it
it
did.
seemed like something that was happening
Right.
sort of in my world,
Yeah.
but in a place that was also kind of foreign to me since I didn't get to really go to Chicago at that point in my life.
Right.
But um, yeah, there are lots of cool shots of
Yeah. Yeah.
1970s Chicago, like even just they'll show long shots of Kolchak cruising in his yellow
Yeah.
convertible
Right.
Mustang
Yeah.
down Lakeshore Drive,
Right.
or
Listening to the Cubs on his radio.
or the L. Their newspaper office is uh, the INS,
Yeah.
Independent News Service, and the office is in an upper floor right next to the elevated train
Right.
where it
Yeah.
passes by. So there are a few episodes where the train barrels past and yeah, just uh, disrupts their
Yeah.
conversations and what they're there's always a cool shot of the train, aerial shot of the elevated train
Right.
going down the track, and then they show the INS window,
Right.
and then the train goes past the window, and then you're inside the bustling newsroom.
I this is my thoughts about Tony Vincenzo. I just feel like he's always busting Kojak's balls, just busting his chops all the time. I didn't think that was necessary. I mean, I get that if you're an old school newspaper editor, that's your job is to
Mhm.
scream at your employees all the time. But I also kind
And
of
You guys,
suspected,
oh,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you guys. I realized that it's possible that we didn't actually introduce who Vincenzo is. So would you mind giving just a 1 minute
Okay, I
summary in
will.
case we
I think
need
I
it for the?
already I mentioned it once, but I might not have mentioned it. So Kojak works for a place called the International News Service (INS), and his editor,
Independent
edit
News Service, I
the
think.
Independent News Service,
Mhm.
not the Immigration Naturalization
Actually,
Service.
yeah.
Actually, he's the editor in chief, Tony Vincenzo.
Well, he's always flustered that
Right,
he's just trying to get through the day, I think.
right.
And
I think at one point he says he's always like saying he should quit. And one time he's
yeah,
like, "Did I ever tell you I've got a brother? He sells Venetian blinds."
that's right. Why didn't I go into the Venetian
What?
blind business?
Venetian blind? He's like, he's got a $50,000 house. Why did I join the news business? Oh, I'm so stupid. And then
He's
he gets
always trying to send Kolchak out on the most innocent assignments to keep the day cool, but
right.
Kolchak will come back with, some kind of crazy
Yeah, he's always
mannequin
telling him
attack and
like, we're trying to be a decent paper, and you're writing articles about succubi and
but
stuff like
Kolchak
that.
is he's just following the evidence.
Yeah, he's just following his reporter's instinct, right? And also Vincenzo's always like, I think at one point he has an ulcer, and then one time he yells at Kojak, and then he takes his pulse, like his blood. He's like, "Oh, my blood pressure! My doctor said I gotta stop yelling at Kojak. Oh, you're driving me crazy. I should have sold Venetian blinds." Oh, and then one time, at one point, he talks about like totally random. He was like, "Didn't I ever tell you, Kolchak, I was in a band in high school? I won Battle of the Bands at Westchester County with my rendition of, I don't know, some 1950s bebop, or not bebop. What do you call it? Doo-wop song, something." I was like, He was in a band? That's interesting. A little character background. It might have been nice to hear a little more about that.
Mhm.
So the other thing that I have to mention is the opening of every episode is really weird because it's supposed to be a scary show, right? But every episode opens up with Kojak coming into his office whistling. The music is not scary at all. It's like doo 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 doo. It's like late 1960s music. Like elevator music, do 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 do, and he's like whistling.
I was going to bring the intro up as well because it's it's one of my favorite all-time uh, television show themes,
Yeah, it's a
and
good theme. It just doesn't really fit
it
particularly, right?
I with the visuals. uh, uh, Kolchak walks into the newspaper office, kind of
Right.
saunters in, like without a care in the world. He's whistling the theme.
Yeah, he's
It's just
whistling.
him whistling. He's like, I don't know, he's like shoving something in his pocket and he gets a pot, he gets the pot of coffee and pours himself a cup. He
I think he
stops
throw. I
whistling to
think he.
take a sip.
I think he throws his hat on the hat
Yeah.
rack.
He turns,
Whee!
starts whistling again, takes his hat off, he throws it at the wall, he takes his camera and portable tape recorder
Right.
off of his shoulder, kind of drops him on his desk, and the music has gone through a lot of changes.
Right.
A flute has joined his whistling as he throws the hat at the wall.
Right.
He sits down, strings come in. They start to swell. He sits down at
Right.
the typewriter, and bass strings. They get very serious, mysterious. Right. He starts typing away, and he's typing weird things. It'll show close-up, so you can't see everything he's typing, like what killings, river, a monster by the river, or something like that. And yeah, then as the bass strings, it kind of rises up into this cacophonous string section. Everything, the full band comes in, and he looks up at the camera. The lights change on his face and gets dark.
It's very ominous.
Then it shows the clock, the hands stop, the fan spinning stops completely, and he quickly looks at something to the side and the freeze frame, and the entire band ends in this amazing abrupt climax. Yeah, but what happened there?
Now, I only watched 7 episodes, but like every single time I watched it, I was kind of in awe. Like it never got old. I was just like, this is weird. Like, what's with this? This is so bizarre. We should probably wrap it up here. Do you have any
furthermore,
do you have any final thoughts, Sean? Would you recommend people to watch it if they've never? Do you think this is enough to get newbies to watch the Night Stalker?
Well, based on our conversation, probably not, but I would recommend it.
What? God. Man, Sean.
I blame myself.
Okay, that's fine. I think people would enjoy it, but I find it pretty amazing that a show made in 1975 is still watchable. Just like the word that just kept coming to my mind was like, it's just so goofy, but in a good way. I mean, so yeah, I'm surprised it stands up, and I think that even if you had never seen it as a kid, obviously people like you and I had watched it before. That's got kind of a nostalgia thing. But I would say even if you'd never seen it before as a kid, it's worth a couple episodes, and it is still a really funny idea that a newspaper reporter would get into supernatural events or whatever. So I think that it's possible, Sean, that someone could listen to this podcast and be like, I think I'll check it out.
I do recommend it. There are definitely adventurous young folks out there that would get into this show. I know it. You know what? I'm sorry to do this to you, but I just looked at my notes quickly, and we would be remiss if we did not at least mention quickly Kolchak's fashion.
Oh yeah, the seersucker suit. You're right. You're right. The seersucker suit.
The entire suit, not the movies. In the movies, he changes clothes.
Oh, he does.
but I think in the series, to my memory, he always wears the same seersucker suit,
Yeah, he does.
blue striped. Like
Right?
maybe he sleeps in those clothes. We don't know.
It looks like he sleeps in them. Pretty
He had like
rumpled.
a vented straw hat.
All I could think of is, there's only one other character on TV that wears that suit. You know that, right, Sean?
Who is it?
Matlock. That's a
Oh,
Matlock suit. That's what
Matlock's a
Matlock.
copycat.
Yeah, Matlock's copycat. And then, of course, I kept thinking that I believe for a very short period of time, Saul Goodman wears the seersucker suit because when he's,
Oh yeah.
I think during Better Call Saul, they show when he first starts out being a lawyer, right, Saul Goodman, that before he starts wearing those really horrifying, gaudy suits, he tries to get a Matlock suit for like I don't know 1 day, I guess before he goes over the dark side. But yeah, definitely, I was like, wow, I guess I've only ever seen Matlock wear that suit. But yeah, it's a very very nice suit. But anyways, I believe that was. I hope that people get inspired by this episode to watch the Night Stalker. Although technically its official title is Kolchak the Night Stalker, and I'm sure
Kolchak, the Night
I'm
Stalker.
mispronouncing his name over and over again. Anyway, so I hope people get inspired to watch this show, and I hope that everyone enjoyed listening to me and Sean talk. And
That's right.
thanks, Janine, for being our producer, and actually you're the editor as well. So it's thanking you in advance for editing all this footage. And any final words, Sean, in general about scary things or Halloween or podcasts or
Um, I can't think of a single goddamned word.